Patience for the construction. You are about ready to see. Lots of money has been dumped into infrastructure, and your community is very aggressive in going after those funds. So certainly patience there. I think as we grow, trying to determine the levels of service and needs of the community will be very important. So patience with that. And then lastly, speak up. Come talk to us. Share with us what your vision is for your community. Share it with your community. MORPC is here to plan for you first. We work for you as a citizen of Central Ohio. So we love to hear what people need to make this the quality community that they want to live in every day.
We are looking forward our way from Studio C in the 511 studios in the Brewery District, just south of downtown Columbus, Ohio. Hey, this is Brett. Carol, I've asked you this numerous times as we come down to the studio. How long did it take you to get here today? I'm guessing, as usual, not a fun ride.
Not a fun ride. Too long. Take my life in my hands, in the hands of the transportation gods just to get here. First time I'd gone through downtown Columbus, and I had not one, not two, but 3 people jaywalked in front of me.
Wow.
It was strange. It was but that's why we are going to talk transportation today. So needless to say, I-71 is a racetrack, and construction in my county, Delaware County, just goes on and on and on. So I never know if I can even get to the freeway. Today, we have a special guest who we dearly love and excited she's back again. She's going to give us an overview of the Central Ohio transportation infrastructure. So welcome to Thea Ewing, who's now the Chief Regional Development Officer and Senior Director of Programming for the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, which we know of as MORPC. Thea, we love having you. Thank you so much for coming again.
Thank you. It's always an honor to be asked back, Carol. I love talking to you and Brett.
Oh, thanks. That title, does that wrap around a business card you back and front?
It's a lot.
It's a lot, isn't it?
Just call me Chief, right?
Yes.
So,
yes.
Chief Regional Development Officer, really focusing on the fact that we are a growing region, right? Yeah. And that was, we really thought about some of our shifts we were making at the beginning of last year with our staffing. And so this really matches up with the work that we're doing now. Okay. So, and it is a promotion. I was really proud and excited to get it.
Absolutely.
So is that a new title in existence, or it existed before, kind of morphing of some disciplines of some stuff you got to do now?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of all those things.
Okay.
It really didn't exist before, except for from the staffing discipline standpoint, my team was kind of broadening to include economic development as a practice. So we've brought in economic development, some additional transportation funding beyond just the urban core, and of course just a lot of innovative projects. And because I was the transportation director, and I was doing all these little extra things. And so I had the opportunity to really talk about where I'm going next. So
when you think, economic issues and transportation have really come together over the past years.
Yeah, and I feel like that's just where my career has kind of the cornerstone of where I've been working. It's on either side of either infrastructure and transportation or very near-term conversations with developers trying to bring us jobs. So I like the fact that both those things live in my department. I am kind of a rare person from a career perspective. You're either normally one or the other, and it's kind of cool that I get to be both and work with teams that are specialties in both economic development and transportation. So it's cool.
So you're becoming a model for the state and the country.
That's right. The MORPC tries its best to bring those best practices for our community.
Nice.
Good. Wonderful. So MORPC's been a powerful partner in our community for many, many years. Folks don't always necessarily understand what's going on with MORPC, what it does, but it has just been an incredible not just partner, but really kind of the linchpin of all of the stuff that's going on and how we're growing. I'm also guessing that to explain MORPC and its goals can sometimes be like overwhelming for people to hear. So tell us, what value does MORPC bring to our community?
Well, thank you for asking that. I am always very excited to share what I do and what our organization does with people in the community. Many people are excited to hear our name because they already know, but some people this is all new to them, and I just feel so fortunate that I get to make a career out of it. So we really, at MORPC, try to focus on improved quality of life for citizens of the Central Ohio region and the local governments that they live in, and we do that via the elected leaders that are on our board. We do focus on that in transportation and infrastructure, helping people with housing and obtain weatherization services for their housing. We assist our local governments with trying to find out what's going on at the State House or on Capitol Hill and how it's going to impact them and their citizens. So we have a pretty long list of things that we do. And I think with all of the growth and opportunities coming to Central Ohio, we're at a really pivotal point, right? We're at a place where a lot of different groups come together. And then during the pandemic, we had quite a role of keeping those folks together and keeping them informed too. So it's just, it's been nonstop, very nonstop.
I think one of the things that, even for someone like me who has worked with MORPC, knows MORPC, thinks I understand what MORPC does, the pivotal thing you said in there was bringing communities together. Because when we hear about regional programs, we tend to think of we're all just sort of thrown in a pot, and we're not. Each little community has its own needs, its own goals, its own mission, and its own set of leaders to get there. And so all of a sudden now, it's like all these little fiefdoms, kind of like Ohio State University, all its little fiefdoms, and bringing it under one umbrella. But that's really what MORPC is doing, is to show how what's good for Upper Arlington can be good not just for Grandview, but for Whitehall or for Westerville or for Grove City, and how all of that in every one of those communities is very, very different.
Mm-hmm. And we're a 15-county area, so
Right.
If you can imagine the difference between communities in this 15-county region, and they are pretty vast, right? We go from purely rural to very urban.
Right.
And so kind of working to ensure that this is a region for all those people, that they have access to jobs in this region, that they have safe ways to transport themselves to the places they need to go, like work, school, and health.
Doctors, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so just making sure that we're kind of bringing that together. I feel like our role, a regional planning commission is something that's in almost every metropolitan area in the United States. But I feel like in Ohio, it serves as a greater role because we are a home rule state. And so there isn't as many incentives for the communities to work together other than us, right? In other states, there are state laws that encourage, a community to plan or encourage them to do certain things. And actually, it's not even encouraged, it's like required, right? So in other states, the communities would be required to do planning or required to do certain things. Because we're home rule, it's awesome that we were set up in a way that our local governments have ultimate control over their future, but also that it makes things very different from community to community. So we help smooth that out and help everybody come up with a good way to work together.
That's interesting. I didn't realize there was that difference. Is Ohio the only one that does this, or?
No, a home rule is it's one type of government, but basically it is the idea that your local government really does control itself and the state doesn't have very much more authority into your city. So you don't have cities that are like our counties are set up in the Ohio Revised Code. Our cities are not. The cities set up their own charters here. Mm-hmm. And so in other states, that's much more prescriptive. In some other states, not all. But in some other states, we are much more an independent, city type state.
15 counties. How many groups are under those 15 counties? Cities, villages, entities. Do we even have any clue?
Oh yeah, we do have some actual numbers, but we have 80 actual members.
Okay.
But our area of interest is those the 15 counties. So our area of interest is 15 counties, and from that area of interest, our 80 members do come from. Some of them are county governments, villages, townships, cities. We also have members that are government entities that do not have a like physical jurisdiction per se, like the zoo, or the various school districts. They do have a jurisdiction, but it's not quite the same as like a city. So we have a number of folks who are engaged with us, both as local government members, but also as like special interest members, like Metro Parks is another one. So yeah, we certainly try to kind of really work with all those entities to bring them together. And then we have maps of different groups of these entities. So we have a Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is for urban planning in the center. And then we have a rural planning organization around it. And then we have various footprints for various programs. But that's the beauty. As a citizen or as a local government leader here, you don't have to know all those maps. That's what we do. We'll
Right.
dissolve all those lines and help bust through those silos so we can actually make things happen here.
But it also shows it's not just complexity, it's the completeness of the planning.
Right.
When you're looking at not just a housing district, but how much green space and where are the waterways and all of the things that go with it. So phenomenal. Thank you.
Thank you.
So when you visited in the past, we talked about a master plan coordinated by MORPC. I'm assuming they continue to update the plan and evaluate transportation infrastructure because it changes weekly, it seems like. The bottom line, a community can't grow if workers can't get their jobs, kids can't get to school, we can't shop, have some fun, go to church, that sort of thing. Can you give some highlights on the master plan and current changes that are under discussion?
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited about this. Every 4 years, MORPC updates the urbanized area metropolitan transportation plan, which we, refer to as a master plan too. And the idea being that, we look into our future to determine how much funding we're going to see over the next at least 20 years, what our goals are for that time period, how much we're going to grow in population, and we update all that. Last time we did it for 30 years, it was 2020 to 2050. And now this one will also go out to 2050. We're just going to shorten up the time. So it'll be basically an update. We plan to have it adopted in 2024, so just next year. And so we're in the thick of working on those projects that the community will want to see in our future. And we do break those down by time periods too. Like the first group, maybe 24 through 28, right? And then and so on. And what we see right now at this point, because we're a little bit early in the process, is that a number of our projects are going to advance. So in our previous plans, they were probably scoped for like 2030, right? Maybe the ones I'm talking about, or 2050. And now we're saying, that needs to happen in 2024, 2027, and the reason why is now we're talking about very specific development opportunities that are coming our way with Intel and with these investments with Honda that we heard about last year. So I think that's really, for us, this is, although we were anticipating a lot of this growth, this is about tightening up around where we need to make improvements to the system. We actually run a whole model underneath this to test it, and then we'll find what roadways we need to focus in on, and that'll be a big focus of what we start doing from the year 24 forward as far as funding. And
that sort of goes right into my next question. The last time we talked, the infrastructure bill had just been passed, and we had no clue if anything was coming to Ohio and how much and what it was going to be for. Do you have updates on that for us?
Yes, although maybe not specific numbers are off the top of my head, but certainly a lot. So our funding at MORPC, as I've previously mentioned, we used to get somewhere in the $35 million in a given year, but roughly to pass to our member partners for transportation projects. Now we're kind of more in that $40 million. So we grew a little, and we anticipate to grow a little bit more every year as this bill goes on, because we're watching, what ODOT brought in as our totals from the federal government. So we're really excited to see that growth. Then the most important growth, though, is actually in a number of discretionary opportunities that are both at the federal level and then funding that the state took in, that they're also going to be doing additional projects and programs. This funding is a lot of it is focused around the conversion to electric vehicles and carbon neutrality. But another part is safety. And you talked about your trip down here today from up in Delaware County. And, the one thing we did see over the last year is an increase in really bad behavior on our roadways. And so between that and just fixing geometric and just unsafe areas for our pedestrians and our drivers, I think we've got a lot to do. And there are a lot of resources coming our way for that.
Does that translate into more money for more roundabouts? Is that?
Well, roundabouts are certainly one of the things that we help fund, and it is a good choice if you have the room for it and it makes sense for that area. But I think that's it. I think protected bikeways that are separated from the roadway in certain areas are definitely in order, like the cycle track we see on Summit even and Fourth. Improved transit facilities that help ensure people can board and unboard in a safe manner. Maybe, be safe from ice and weather. So it's not just about the big projects; it's about the little projects too, and making sure that our connectivity is spot on for the future of Central Ohio.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Another important piece of legislation supported the bid to bring Intel to Ohio. Obviously, they were committed, but the CHIPS Act funding made it a reality. Intel is taking over large pieces of New Albany, Johnstown, and other communities in Lincoln County. The new facilities are going to greatly change that community landscape, already have. Can you give us an overview of the work MORPC is doing to ensure Intel project meets that community's needs?
Well, we're one of many partners working with the Intel project area, New Albany, Johnstown, and primarily Lincoln County. Probably the most notable planning efforts that are taking place today are by the Evans Foundation, and it's known as Framework. We have been assisting them along with Lincoln County Planning Department and just ensuring that they're having those community conversations they want to have. They've started really focusing on 15 local governments that are closest to that site, like New Albany, like Johnstown, and some of the townships around there. But their goal is to broaden that effort and kind of really make sure that they're being inclusive of their entire community. They do have a very significant focus on Lincoln County. We also are doing a lot of planning, and we're both at the table with them, but we're also doing some additional. As I mentioned, we are doing our Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So there's a lot of information and data that goes into that that's going to be important to everybody working on this, because that model is behind all of this. So updating all the statistics from the census and stuff will be important for that, and building permits, to tell us where growth is happening. So we're doing a lot in the way of data crunching, helping this foundation take off with their planning effort, and then doing our own, and then ODOT too. So ODOT is doing a study that is very transportation focused, and it's also right there centered around the plant area, and they're looking at concentric circles from the plant in the 20-minute travel zone, the 40-minute travel zone, and the 60-minute travel zone to really determine the kind of roadway infrastructure improvements that need to happen quick versus kind of the long-term planning and that we need to save the money for or go apply for all these grants for, right? So, but all in all, we are just really excited about all these opportunities. It's a lot at one time. So we're really thinking strategically about, MORPC is going to lead this effort and the Evans Foundation is going to do this. And it's really, really about bringing all these parts and pieces together of the puzzle so that we can make this work together.
Yeah. I heard recently what the focus, I mean, I guess initially is the 161 corridor, I guess, maybe expanding it, or at least that's a first look of doing something with that or changing it up or something like that. I forget what pieces of it, but yeah, I that's what I thought I heard.
Yeah. So that work should be underway fairly shortly.
Okay.
In September of 2022, we actually passed a Metropolitan Transportation Plan amendment, which added this project to our plan for funding, and also added it to the Transportation Improvement Program, which is what funds it. It was it's a multitude of projects, over $200 million, a majority of it 161, but also the roadways around the Intel facility as well, improving some of those. And then towards the end of the year, they were also talking about advancement of that 161 widening even further east, too.
Yeah.
So certainly we are, we're heading into a lot of projects in the Licking County area, but I think, there's just a lot of projects everywhere.
A little overwhelming, isn't it?
It can be, but if we treat it like that, then I think we're really missing out on the opportunity to be very excited, engaged, and just, the opportunities that come along for us to shape the way things are going to happen don't happen every day, and to sit here and be part of that process. Pretty cool, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look at the years we've put into the 70-71 split.
Right.
And still going strong, but when it's done, it's going to be phenomenal.
Yeah, you just got to stay with it. Yeah, and the last couple of years have been a big deal to get all the money we've gotten for that, and that's the reason why you've seen so much construction out there, and we're going to still see it in the next year or two. But that's what we have to do to continue doing this work, because it's so expensive. You can't just come in and do it all at once.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, because if you haven't been down in the downtown area, now you're starting to see the very tall cement pillars for the flyover ramps and such.
Right.
It's like, okay, now this is starting to come together.
Yeah, you can kind of see what's going to happen there. So it's very cool.
It's amazing. It is amazing. So, Thea, much of our public transportation doesn't always work for the able-bodied, the elderly, special groups. But I think MORPC just recently requested proposals for projects to meet those needs in each of the different situations. Can you give us some examples of programs that are being created through MORPC funding that will enhance transportation systems for those special communities?
Yes. So we have a special funding resource from the Federal Transit Administration known as the Enhanced Mobility and Senior Individuals with Disabilities Program, also known as Federal Transit Administration's 5310 program. None of those are really easy titles. We just call it 5310. What is exciting about this program is providers of these services, transportation services for elderly or disabled populations can reach out to us and actually obtain a bus that they may need for their service. Or maybe they're not in the business of having a bus because that's just too much to maintain. They can work with us and apply for tickets, right? Just for their clients to use on these services if their clients meet this criteria. We work with a number of senior centers, like the Grove City Senior Center, and I'm trying to think, National Church Residence has been an applicant of ours before. So the idea is that we're putting additional resources on the street, and they are dedicated to seniors and to persons with disability first. And the organizations who get them, that's what their mission has to be, or we will take them back. So
there you go.
So,
but this is a sort of a key issue here, is that you're not just making plans, you're not just doing the research. You have funding to actually make something happen for an individual tomorrow.
Yeah. We do stuff that's very live and in the market too. I kind of joke with my planners and folks that do work into the future that they're not really living in the now, right? They're thinking ahead. They're not working in a market, right? Like folks who are out there working with these folks, trying to make sure that they have their transportation needs met. Or we have another program that focuses on rideshare for work, and that's become a big part of our conversation of getting people back into the workplace, especially in the last year in 2022. So, having those market-driven people in our mix is good for us because it really helps ground us in the now while we're still kind of like have our heads in the clouds thinking about that big, awesome future that we have ahead of us.
Right. Yeah, it's one thing to talk 2050. It's another thing to make sure somebody has a bus ticket tomorrow.
Yeah, that can be a real downer, having to like do things today. I love dreaming into the future, but like the realities of today, it's like, okay, but if we don't meet those realities of today, we're never going to get to tomorrow. And I think that has really helped to ground me too. You've heard me talk about a lot of crazy technologies. So.
Oh yes, and we love it too. We're going to talk about trains before you leave.
Okay,
but I guess this kind of goes back to a conversation we just had regarding things like what we were doing an age-friendly podcast, and I learned in that project that what's good for an older adult is good for all of the community. And one of the things I would see driving to work on Hamilton Road every day, going to my agency, was a post in the ground for a bus stop. Mm-hmm. There are days I used to see students with huge backpacks of books just standing there in the rain. I'd see moms with kids standing in there in the snow. Older people with walkers literally standing there waiting for a bus. And so we need to know that we can get CODA to put shelters up in appropriate places. Now, this was near the airport, so there could be a whole reason around why they can't put a shelter there because it was behind the airport and right under flight paths and all of that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But to see that MORPC is also looking at those little tiny pieces. It's not just where 161 is going to get extended to and whose land is going to be taken for that extension.
Well, yeah, I think that's important to note about a shift we've seen in transportation policy with the additional funds that came from the bipartisan infrastructure law. There's a heavy focus on equity and ensuring that there's access for all people to the things that they want to get to. As a result of that, I think you're going to see us even go more granular in conversations and ensuring that we really have options for everyone. Certainly the funding and the authorities are now in place, more so than we've ever seen under past programs. So the realities of like us maybe helping host a bike share or things like that are much more palatable now than where we used to focus much more on bigger projects. I think we're still going to be very involved in the bigger projects. I think we just need this additional layer because we're just trying to ensure that we have these opportunities for everybody in the region.
Bottom line is if people aren't using public transportation, we're never going to grow public transportation.
Right.
And they have to be able to use it today.
They have to want to like it.
Yes.
Right? And I think, we have a lot to do there. And I will say we have leaders in this community who are very committed to trying some new opportunities as we move forward. We worked a lot of it on Link Us in the last couple of years. That's going to continue happening. We're waiting for that right opportunity. Not necessarily waiting. We're continuing to work. But as far as funding goes, we are certainly waiting for the right window to really take off with some of those project components. But in the meantime, some of the smaller components will be coming on. So we're really looking at innovative ways to get ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, during your last visit, we talked about the different needs between riders from the urban and rural areas. We talked a little bit about that even earlier in the podcast. We shifted our transportation thinking when companies moved to areas outside of the Outer Belt. And, of course, it's going to be an issue in Lincoln County with the Intel project. How does MORPC support communities outside of the core city in their efforts to move workers to employment?
Well, we certainly try to encourage growth in along existing corridors. That's just a good practice due to the fact that you already have the roads there, the infrastructure there, the utilities, mail service comes there already. There's just a lot of things good about reinvesting in properties that are needing reinvestment and regeneration. One of the programs we do is actually a brownfield assessment program. So I know it doesn't sound like transportation, but we do actually pair that up with transportation, and we assist property owners in identifying if there's anything, or even if you're a prospective property owner, even we will give you the funds to assess it, to determine if there's anything dirty on it, and if there in fact is something that needs to be taken care of, we'll also determine what needs to be done and give them that report too. I mean, we've spent as much as $120,000 on one project just to tell somebody how dirty the property is. But those projects then go on to be successfully redeveloped city projects or within the urban. We've seen some happen, the projects in Whitehall with the condos that got renovated and they're turning over to new office and housing there. I'm trying to think of, I know even like Gladden House, they had an extra property nearby them. They needed to know, they're a nonprofit. They can't spend a lot of money on trying to determine what this is going to, what this ultimately is to use that property for a garden or something would cost. So we have that. So we do unique things for the communities, right? We have more than what you just think as like the normal, like big highway projects. We have something to help you plan that. We have services, as we mentioned, that do housing weatherization. So, honestly, if you're a community who has a need, the first step is just come talk to MORPC, because even if we don't do the service, we know who does the service and we can help you find what you need for your community.
Okay.
Wonderful. So I have another smaller community question. I was noticing when I was coming up with all these questions for our podcast today, and I'm looking through the MORPC website, that the city of Lancaster just received some assistance to improve transportation around the city's core. So anybody out there who has ever sat on Route 33, like I have many, many times, knows that it's difficult sometimes to get between Columbus and Lancaster. And Lancaster is a wonderful community, lots going on. And I have good friends there, so we want to be able to get there kind of quickly and have dinner together. Are there examples of other kinds of projects like that MORPC's been working on to try to make? We're not only just making a community better, but we're making the connections between communities better.
Route 23. Route 23.
Yeah.
Route 23.
South?
North.
Okay.
No, both.
North is not north is worse than south.
I agree.
23. Oh my gosh. High Street North. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's
from the lights.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got a whole other question on that now. Go for it, Dan. Go for it.
All right. So we are working with small communities. I think that's also a new face of MORPC. It's something we've been doing since 2017, 2018, but you're starting to see the work show up on the streets now. We started a rural transportation planning organization back about 5 years ago now, and the first funded when it first started, when the Rural Transportation Planning Program first started at MORPC, it's called the Central Ohio Rural Planning Committee, and it's Corpo. So like MORPC, but it's Corpo. When we first started getting that group together, all we had was money just to do their planning. That was it, just to look at projects they wanted to do, determine what kind of funding that may be out there for them, but not actually get it, and maybe do some early analysis of the project. But then after we did that for a couple of years, we actually got money to do projects. And so what you saw in 2022 are the very first projects from that effort took off, and one of which was the one in Lancaster that you're talking about.
Okay.
So we're going to start to see that more and more. Right now, the money we get, it's not a lot, about $1 million a year for that. It could be a lot more. But also, we have the chance to work with ODOT and help guide these applicants to some other pool resources, like, grant applications. This year and soon, the governor is going to be introducing the budget, right? And the transportation budget is going to be up. there's an opportunity for us to talk about more transportation dollars for rural areas then too, and as well as things we need in the urban areas. So, MORPC's really tried to broaden our services to ensure that we can really meet the needs of all of our Central Ohio communities. And I'm just so glad that you saw that. That means that, that work I started 5 years ago, my team started 5 years ago, it's starting to make a difference, and just everyday citizens are seeing it. That's awesome.
Right. So I'm off on a tangent here. This is why we have
I'm the
scripts.
queen of tangents.
I'm telling you, this is, it doesn't matter if I do a script or not. I'm always on a tangent.
Brett's an editing master.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. So way back when, I went to school in Detroit for a year. And many of the major roads in Detroit were built with bypasses around them. So it was like a road around a road. And it was so to keep the main road flowing, and basically it was to get the people who had to work downtown out to the suburbs quickly, where if you were going to the grocery store or the cleaners or whatever, you get off on the little bypasses and get that way. I noticed there was an article in maybe the New York Times several months ago that Detroit is going to get rid of those. And it seemed to me it was perfect because it kept the community intact, but allowed, without putting a freeway through a neighborhood, it allowed faster transportation. Are there any other places that do things like that have those kind of little bypass kind of thing? It's like having a service road, basically. It's a service road.
Yeah.
Right.
I was sitting here thinking
bypass.
I think she's talking about service road.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, of course, there are a lot of places, typically places that have a lot of traffic. Tourist areas tend to have a lot of service roads. You don't see as much of that in Central Ohio. I've seen a couple up on Morris Road. But it's just not a common practice of ours. What I can say about infrastructure you see going away like that, especially if it was to accommodate additional amounts of traffic, Detroit's significantly decreased in population from when those were built. And so they most likely have identified that it's not necessary, and it's also not going to be necessary through that whole long-range plan that I talked about we're doing. So once they determine that, it's kind of well, why are we spending money maintaining this?
True.
And what is, if we have 2 roads to move cars and 0 of those have any paths for people who want to walk, ride their bike, catch the bus, it's not a modern, complete street. And so I'm sure that was part of the thought too. The other thing is, last year when the bipartisan infrastructure bill really the funding started flowing, another focus was trying to right the wrongs of the past and reconnecting communities. And so many of those communities, especially if they have service roads, I would think they took up large swaths of communities that may have existed prior to that. So that's another factor we're taking into account. And there's a whole grant fund just about taking down bridges that were interstate bridges that ripped through communities. We're also trying to go after those dollars for various projects in Central Ohio. But I think there's many of them across the country. It's an interesting factoid. I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but if you go on the auditor's website and you look at where all the lot lines are, if you look at the interstate, you will see lot lines underneath the interstate. Those lot lines were people's houses.
Right.
Whenever the interstate moved through here.
Oh,
Gotcha.
yes. And that's another whole story that's been going on in looking in Central Ohio as to what happened with the communities.
Right.
My grandparents' house was taken for 71.
Right.
And it ran right next to my aunt's house. So I was probably only in 4th or 5th grade and looking through this big fence that was next to her house, and all you saw was a ditch, a huge ditch. It looked like it had been bombed out. It was scary. It was a little scary. So, yeah, and that was there was a comparison of the growth of Clintonville compared to the growth of Linden and Northland, and how 71 changed the growth of those areas. So, yeah, it's interesting.
It is fascinating, and I think this look back that we've been doing in the last couple of years have really told us a lot about what we could do better for the future planning of the region. Not just, and that's not just happening here, it's happening all over. But I think particularly here we have a lot of lessons to learn and a lot of opportunities to take advantage of to ensure that especially all these new jobs that are coming in, that everybody has a chance to go after those opportunities.
Right. And I do think that change in Detroit, they don't have much green space. And I think a lot of that was going to be changed into parks and green space, which could be very advantageous for those neighborhoods.
Yeah, they have a very stark hardscape up in Detroit. And the times that I visited, I remember seeing a ton of concrete. So that would be ideal to really help soften and kind of bring that quality of life aspect that people are looking for when they're looking to place themselves in a new community.
Yeah. So our listeners are probably going to push right ahead into this episode to this mark, 40 minutes in.
Yes.
To know about
I will.
Hyperloop potential passenger trains coming to Columbus.
Awesome.
What do you think?
You know you can't come to our podcast without me talking about the Hyperloop
and will
and the
that passenger train make a left or a right to go to Intel and then come back around?
Good point. Oh my goodness, we keep saying that my plea to Thea has been, please get the train to Chicago before I'm 90.
I'm hopeful for that too.
You're 90 or her 90?
Any at this point.
If it's her 90, I'm in trouble.
May not be. Really excited about some of the new opportunities that have come our way with passenger rail. I first would need to at least address the Hyperloop question. And we've studied Hyperloop as a technology for the last 2 or 3 years prior to last year. Things really shifted with the company a little bit. They had some change up on their board. The Trump administration was not a huge supporter, but a supporter of the technology. And they actually had set up a whole organization in DOT to look at new technologies. That really doesn't exist anymore. So they're still on a path for certifying their technology for use in the United States. It's just not as fast as it once was. And they've really looked at more services abroad. Hyperloop has a major freight investor in the United Arab Emirates. And because of that, they've really started to take more of a focus towards freight and towards that investor. Doesn't mean they're not interested in working here. Doesn't mean they're not interested in our route. We're still interested in that. But we have to move forward with technologies that are ready for us to embrace when money is available. Money is available for rail. There was a significant investment via the bipartisan infrastructure package. So we're going to continue looking at new technologies, but we're going to take the studies that we did with Hyperloop and rail and start advancing potential rail projects with that information. So at the end of 2022, big opportunities came along. First was that the state was able to, as a group, not necessarily as the state of Ohio, but as a group of communities, advance its interest in going after the new funds that were established for passenger rail new and expansion projects in the United States. Amtrak worked with us quite a bit. But first and foremost is that we're pursuing funding for 3C and D passenger rail service in the state of Ohio, which is Cincinnati, Dayton, Columbus, and Cleveland. As originally proposed, we were looking at 3 trains a day, about 2.5 hours time out of Columbus towards Cincinnati or Cleveland, a little higher than what you'd drive in a car, but also takes out bathroom stops, potential traffic. There's a lot of other things you erase with that trip. So we feel like it's pretty competitive for a start. We know there's potential to make it go faster. We've got to meet with other states and talk to them about what they did to make theirs faster. And when that happens, it also the price goes down because more people buy tickets, and then the subsidies that the state or local governments have to pay to go down. Also at the end of the year, so we're really excited about 3C&D and pursuing that interest with our partners across the state. Also, we got into a very detailed conversation with our partners around our Chicago to Pittsburgh line, which was the Chicago to Pittsburgh line, which was the line that we studied for Hyperloop. And with this line, Amtrak is starting to warm up to the idea of adding it to its national map, which that was not something that was under consideration in the past. So that would come on even during this 5 years when all this new money is available is a big deal. We may be chasing 2 corridors, not one. During 2022, also the Convention Center did a study to look at a potential station downtown. We've been working with a number of our communities to identify station locations in their communities and what facilities they're going to need. Working with CODA to determine the kind of service that's going to need to happen. So these conversations are really happening now, and businesses are excited about it. We're having conversations with other communities, and we are talking to the state about it in a very open fashion. So no decisions have readily been made available as far as specific funding for projects yet, but we do have our hands up saying we are interested, we're vested, and there are many of us in the state of Ohio who are on this path to getting the funding.
And those of us who remember the old train station coming down to build the convention center, we have some arches for you that you can use.
Yeah. Yeah, this one's going to be a lot smaller and a little bit more efficient. I will say it makes me sad to know that station's gone. I've had the chance over the last couple of years to go into the kind of grand rail stations of some of our other communities across the nation because we're studying this and I'm traveling rail just to see what it's like and wow, I could only imagine. I mean, I never saw that building, wasn't even alive for that, but well, maybe. Yeah, I was in 78, I guess. There's no way I can remember it. So, but the bottom line is just feeling like, we missed out on that because those are such beautiful buildings. I know that, for instance, like the NFL draft is going to be held in the Union, or recently has been held in the Union Station in Kansas City. Right. And these are just beautiful buildings that made it a big part of
Cincinnati's rail line is the museum.
Yes, it's a beautiful museum.
Incredible. I think it's 3 museums in one building.
Oh, right.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the way it's designed. And so these are iconic buildings, and the one in Detroit, that went in the state in disrepair that the Ford took over. So there's, these are pillars in our communities. So as, I hate the fact that we had one torn down. I'm glad that we're going to get the service back. But also as our communities plan for their new stations, what's it going to be efficient and going to meet the needs of now? Nobody's going to build a station like that anymore because the needs aren't there. But what are the needs of today, right? And that's really what we're focused on now. So it's just such an exciting time that we're getting a new mode potentially in Central Ohio. I don't care if it's one from the 1800s.
I'm waiting with bated breath.
Yeah, you and me both. But I'm working hard on it every day too.
I know you are, Thea. If you need me to carry your luggage on that next trail ride, you let me know.
I love riding on a train. It is convenient.
Oh, it's so much fun. Mm-hmm. It really is fun. So, every time you come to see us, the time goes faster and faster. I think so. It's amazing. And we've covered everything, but we always ask our guests if you have last words of wisdom, some information to pass along to our listeners.
Yes. So my words of wisdom are patience for the construction you are about ready to see. Lots of money has been dumped into infrastructure, and your community is very aggressive in going after those funds. So certainly patience there. I think as we grow, trying to determine the levels of service and needs of the community will be very important. So patience with that. And then lastly, speak up. Come talk to us. Share with us what your vision is for your community. Share it with your community. MORPC is here to plan for you first. We work for you as a citizen of Central Ohio, so we love to hear what people need to make this the quality community that they want to live in every day.
And issues that citizens have, it may not be just their need. They may not realize that it's an issue that you hadn't thought of, that a lot of people need. We should probably also tell folks that with all this construction coming in, be careful and don't be aggressive in your driving around those construction projects on the freeways, because there are people out there working.
Right.
And they've got families to go home to.
Yes.
Well, and I couldn't agree more. The driving habits over the last year have been atrocious. Mm-hmm. And so I think we all have more to do there. I just want to ensure that when we do have people out using our bike trails and or walking on the side of the street, that they are safe. I want to know that for my own family. So I think we all have work to do around safer driving as a habit, as well as improving the roadways.
Agree.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Thanks, Thea Ewing from the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, for joining us. Listeners, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to check out our show notes for contact information and resources that are on our website at lookingforwardourway.com. We're looking forward to hearing from you, your feedback on this and any of our podcast episodes.